The Devil's Picture Book by Simon Christopher Buck. Chapter 1. New London Newcomers.
"Are you needing anything? You don't look too good," says the passer-by, bending low the better to look him in the face. The young man looks up, with an expression of glazed confusion, like a deep sleeper startled awake from tangled dreaming. "If you don't mind my saying so," she adds kindly. He looks up again, narrowing his eyes in the bright sunlight, then smiles vacantly, recognizing her kindness, if not quite grasping her intention. "No, I'm fine, really," he replies at last, dragging this conventional response from the recesses of his wakefulness. "I'm waiting to be picked up, actually." The woman hesitates to respond to this at first. "A mini-bus, apparently, whatever that is," he adds, still homing in on the present moment. "Oh, I know what they are," she replies, hurriedly, as if she shouldn't have asked for some reason. "Well, if you're sure." "Yes, thank you," he says, still looking up into her concerned face as she makes to straighten up. Standing upright, she peers at the archaic stonework against which the young man is seated, a looming castellated wall at the foot of which a convenient ledge of stone, smoothed with timeless use, provides an unofficial seat for those needing rest at this well-known rendezvous spot. She looks all the way up to the parapet for a few seconds, her turn to squint against the bright blue sky, then, as though complaining about the punctuality of public transport, "Not good for you, these pre-war stones. You're never sure if they're safe, I always think," she says, directing her gaze at no one in particular. Then she looks at him. He shrugs, thinks about it and shrugs again, but says nothing. She shakes her head. "Well, I hope they come for you soon. The minibus," she says, smiling more easily once again. New London is noted by its visitors for its many historical remnants, as they are known. Residents and incomers alike are often instinctively suspicious of ruined structures. Redolent they believe them to be of the ravages of the quantum wars to which the island of Great Britain had long been subject, especially along the southern coastal regions, and here particularly to where the capital of England had been relocated, opposite the island of Wight, the year after the last remaining districts of old London had succumbed to rustication. Many believe, wrongly, that abandoned, damaged buildings are dangerously radioactive or even infected with mutant microbiological contagion. Received wisdom has it that the firth of New London, known locally as London Water, so closely resembled the estuary of Old London, to some a specious comparison, that for that reason the political authorities had chosen here as the new site for the capital. This was partly, as the story goes, in order to ensure that the displaced civil and civic authorities and their families would feel more at home, despite these widely held misgivings about broken buildings. The ancient stones of the ruined Bargate in the south of the city have retained a much greater resemblance to how they must have looked in previous centuries than almost any other building in town, but some persist in their belief that they could be capable of initiating a life-threatening short-range space-time warp. The sound of an electric passenger vehicle causes both the young man and the older woman to turn and look. "Seems like your lift has arrived," she comments. "'Bout time too," she adds, somewhat irrationally. "Well, goodbye then," she says finally, and she makes a small, awkward, girlish wave of the hand as if not quite sure how to end this short interlocution of theirs. There is a hiss of pneumatics as a mechanical door opens. The young man looks to see who is stepping out of the minibus. "Ah, this is what one is," and looks back to the woman who has now disappeared amongst the shoppers whence she came. The young man watches the older boy, or young man of his own age perhaps, who steps down out of the opened door right at the front of the 17-seater vehicle. He strikes him as a boy, especially at first, because disarmingly he is wearing school uniform. Charcoal grey trousers and polished but scuffed black leather shoes. He has a clean white shirt with a slackly knotted silk tie in broad, equal red and green stripes. At a later date, revealed to be familiarly known as wine and bottle, with a thin gold stripe between, this being the insignia of a prefect. Under his wine-red twill school blazer he is wearing a waistcoat, fronted in flamboyantly elaborate silk brocade, encrusted with a multi-layered machine-embroidered design of intertwined, part-abstracted foliage and flowers, a garment of such individuality being the privilege of a prefect. On his lapel he is tautologically wearing an enamelled metal badge sporting the appellation Prefect in small capitals. "Hop in, come along, chop chop," he says, waving his hand like a traffic marshal. He is not smiling, though his demeanour is brusquely but inclusively collegial. The young man pulls himself wearily to his full height, somehow shimmying, calling on some last available energy which he requires to power the necessary dignity and decorum for this final ride, as if to the scaffold. He plods up the 2 metal steps, and stooping considerably, he is tall. His gaze searches the sudden gloom of the bus interior. The sun was bright outside. He spots the wide seat across the stern of the cabin, it being unoccupied, and heads there directly. As he swings inelegantly, because exhaustedly, into place on the welcomingly available padded bench, he glances out through the rear window and fancies he gets a final glimpse of the woman who had spoken to him. But she's facing the other way and he really can't be sure. "Next stop, Lord Goff's," says the prefect, parodying an announcement on some outmoded form of public transport. "Buck up, everyone. Unlimited tea and toast when we get back to schoolhouse." There is an anonymous grunt of appreciation from one of the other passengers, of whom in the gloaming it is now clear there are 4 altogether, including the prefect and the young man from the bar gate, who now shows signs of falling asleep, final reserves expended. "Schoolhouse?" he queries drowsily. The prefect has followed him down the centre aisle while ensuring everyone is seated correctly. A computerised ping is audible to all, presaging an automated announcement. "That's right, best house in the school," boasts the prefect, but a synthesised voice interrupts him. "Passengers, please now take your seats for your comfort and safety. This vehicle is about to begin moving." The voice is genderless, the accent indeterminate, though more old London than new London, the intonation devoid of emotion. "But I've left school. I have, though, already, I think," says our young man to the prefect. "Yes, well, you aren't the only one, are you? That's the system here. It's back to school, full board and tuition, or nothing. Goes for all of you." He turns away. "Back to school, or back where you came from?" he continues under his breath, as the bus moves off and starts to pick up speed. He makes his way with sea-legged gait back to the front of the bus and sits in the seat where the human driver might have sat in an earlier age, and starts to fiddle with the miniature device on his wrist, lost in his own concerns. The journey by road to the drive on Tetramaran by which they will cross the London water takes them directly along the sea front. Way out in the estuary, a huge air freight liner is taxiing over the surface of the waves, the hull and floats shedding water behind the craft when it lurches into the air like an underpowered but graceful goose or swan, and the afterburners flame on. "I didn't know if you wanted to come along to welcome those refugees, May," the music teacher is saying. The younger woman is shaking her head. "Of course I do, Miss Lomax." She smiles. The older woman grins broadly. "Well, yes, there will probably be some splendid young men." Mei Yi resumes her head shaking anew, assuming a studied expression of disdain this time. "Maybe there will be some more tenors for the Madrigal Society," says Miss Lomax, not sounding as hopeful as the words might suggest at face value. "Well, I'm not holding my breath," says Mei Yi, breathing heavily, not looking up. The minibus drives up a steep ramp and onto the broad vehicle deck of the Tetramaran, behind and between various very tall, crewless freight transporters. Another bland, computerised announcement asks the passengers to leave the minibus during the crossing. Signage informs that refreshments are available for purchase in a facility on an upper deck in the bows, but presuming no one has any money, the prefect leads his party to the open-air after-deck, sheltered and sunny, where they range themselves along the white-painted handrail overlooking the rocket-like rearward water jets which power the massive vessel. After a crossing of nearly 15 minutes, or 900 seconds to use the more standard scientific unit, the Tetramaran scrapes into its dedicated mooring structure on the island of Wight. Immediately the heavy freight vehicles begin to roll, whisper quiet, off the ferry and away to their destinations. Some disappear down a steep slope into a strikingly narrow tunnel reserved, as the signs make clear, for driverless, passengerless traffic. "Them lorries fit mighty tightly," as a local phrase has it. The school minibus takes a more relaxed route across the middle of the island, though bypassing the provincial capital in the centre. Everyone is asleep but the prefect, who switches languidly between reviewing messages on his wrist device and idly surveying the countryside past which they are gently speeding. In the music room, Miss Lomax picks up a clipboard. "Duty calls," she trills. "I'll wander over to the front entrance, give them a proper welcome and take them over to schoolhouse. Why don't you use the opportunity to do a bit of practice and come over in a while? The room might not be free later." "Good idea, miss. Thanks. I'll come over later." Miss Lomax bundles up her gown, getting into a slight pickle trying to manage both it and the clipboard, along with opening and closing the doors, but waving away May's motions of proffered help, she is gone. May walks over to the historical Pleyel harpsichord by the long window overlooking a patch of secluded lawn in the shelter of an evergreen tree, which is almost always deserted. A North American grey squirrel is running up the tree just as she opens the lid to expose the two keyboards one above the other. Watching her feet, she carefully depresses 3 of the 7 pedals arranged in a strange row beneath the instrument, thereby making her choice from the range of different sounds available. And with one hand on each keyboard, May begins to play the Prelude and Fugue No. 5 in D major from Das Wohltemperierte Klavier by J.S. Bach. The bus tootles in through the school gates and oh so precisely makes a multi-point manoeuvre, coming neatly to a stop beside another similar bus in an allocated space to one side of the low stone steps up to the main entrance. "This journey is now completed. Passengers may now leave the vehicle. Those to the front of the bus, please leave first." The hiss and a waft of different air. The sea is once again clearly in view, the chalk white rock of the Needles just visible beyond some buildings. A sound of unfamiliar voices enters the bus, more arrivers disembarking from the other bus. Inside the entrance hall another schoolboy stands patiently. He too seems too old for the uniform. On the wall there is an electromechanical clock which clicks loudly every second. A discrete control panel betrays its function as an atomic master clock, keeping all the school clocks aligned to laboratory standards of precision. Next to the clock there is a notice board fixed to the wall. On the notice board is pinned a sheet of paper of uncertain origin showing a list of names, or rather a list of people, several of which are indicated with a cryptic unknown identity. These pupils, the term students is considered infra-dig, are the newcomers. That some, perhaps all, are refugees is not stated. "Come along, chop chop, just in here, a teacher is coming, you'll get your toast in a few minutes." The prefect is leading his wards, followed immediately behind by another few dazed-looking people, all young males. A second prefect comes up in the rear. His waistcoat is a less ostentatious appliqué confection. He nods to the first prefect, giving a genial "what ho," receiving a crisp Bavarian "servus" in reply, also with curt nod. As if on cue, Miss Lomax sweeps around the corner and into the foyer, her trademark ample green academic gown billowing, then settling about her. "Thank you, gentlemen," she says graciously, raising her eyebrows to show to whom she is addressing this, who respond by replying synchronously, each with his own "thank you, miss." Exeunt prefects. She nods round the room, silently making a tally. "Welcome, one and all, welcome to Lord Goff's, the finest academic establishment on the island, some might say in the country. I am Miss Lomax, head of music. There will be opportunities aplenty to take part in school music making in due course, of which I hope you will all avail yourselves. Music is a hallowed tradition in this school, with recitals throughout the year, culminating in the grand annual summer concert, in which I hope at least some of you will take part. Doubtless others will be more interested in sport, and there will be plenty of time for that too. Tomorrow I believe Mr. Linham will talk to you about cricket. Now, let us repair to schoolhouse where refreshments are provided.
Follow me."
Across the quadrangles, Miss Lomax, in full sail, leads a slightly bedraggled column of young men, brought just a little low by the vicissitudes of a now concluded war, onward, as if toward a brighter future. Finishing the bark without flourish, Mei Yi's fingers linger on the harpsichord keys for a short moment as the sound of the strings dies away. Closing the lid carefully and replacing the score in the modest library of sheet music along one wall of the music room, she is lost in thought. Taking her favourite, less direct route, she slips along a cloister and comes into the school entrance hall via a short corridor mostly used only by the caretaking staff. To her disappointment, the foyer contains none of the people so recently gathered there. However, her eyes alight on the schedule of newcomers posted beside the clock. Someone has been ticking the names, including some of the anonymous ones, and a single name seems almost to jump from the page. A name she recognises, and a name she now knows she had half hoped, half expected to see amongst the others, and it is ticked. Making a little gasp, she brings her hand up to her mouth, then, spinning on the balls of her feet, she springs off, headed for the forbidden dormitory building. The tea and toast has generally revived everyone, so that the atmosphere in the schoolhouse common room has shifted perceptibly from waiting room for the exhausted to something more like a tea break at a conference, the newcomers standing about in groups, chatting politely. Multiple mugs full, thankfully not dainty cups, of strong tea have been and are continuing to be consumed. The one of the dinner ladies assigned to this event has just brought in her third tray of toasted mixed brown and white sliced bread, all pre-buttered with the school regulation hydro-veg, which some complain tastes off-puttingly of coconut. The generic mixed fruit catering jam supplied has proved more popular than the industrial marmalade as served at breakfast, the only other option. Tompkins has found and introduced himself to two people he believes he remembers. They in turn seem to remember him, though none of them is frankly sure. Still less sure are they all are from when and whence they each came. Miss Lomax overhears some of this talk and steps over, beaming beatifically.
"Don't worry, gentlemen. Many people in your circumstances find they cannot ever be quite sure what their previous circumstances were actually like before these global quantum conflicts began to wreak their havoc with people's lives and consciousnesses. It's the age we live in," she says. The boys murmur, sensing validity in what she says, but no one has anything concrete to add. "You'll find you have a modicum of time here and space to regain your bearings, to regain a sense of your own place in the universe. Or so we can only hope," she beams.
Tompkins and his two new old friends all take big swigs of tea, nodding. Miss Lomax continues to beam, nodding her own head, looking in turn at each boy as she becomes aware of a muffled sound, some commotion outside the room, outside the building perhaps. Tompkins seems to recognise something.
"Subramanian, that's Jonathan Subramanian. Can I visit him?"
Mei Yi is screaming, banging excitedly on the door of schoolhouse, though she immediately begins to recover herself, trying to hide her embarrassment.
"Oh, I haven't seen him,"
says Tompkins, coming to the door, perplexed, still munching toast. Miss Lomax also comes to the door, peering at the old-fashioned clipboard she is still holding.
"There are 8 names and 8 boys altogether."
"Are you counting me?"
asks Tompkins.
"Oh, yes."
"No, you see, Miss
Lomax?"
Yes, of course, Miss Lomax, that's right. I came here on the bus a few days ago. I'm living in Scudamore House. I didn't come today."
"Oh, I see,"
Miss Lomax mutters, consulting her clipboard.
"Are you, Tompkins?"
"Yes, that's right, miss."
"Well, where is he? Jonathan?"
interrupts Mei Yi, still a little shrill.
"I've still got his certificate."
At that instant the prefect with the outrageous waistcoat arrives at the door alongside Mei Yi. "Everything in order, Miss Lomax?" he asks officiously.
"Well, we appear to be missing one boy, apparently. Subramanian," says Miss Lomax.
"Oh, he was on my bus," says the prefect, losing some of his sang-froid. "I wonder if he is still asleep."
"I'll go," says Tompkins. "Was it the blue minibus?"
"That's the one you came in on. It's probably still out the front, though it's due for garaging pretty soon." Tompkins shoots off across the quad and is quickly out of sight.
This Subramanian, is he someone you knew from before the wars? Asks Miss Lomax, very gently. I was looking at that list in the entrance. I saw the name and suddenly something came back to me, vividly, all of a sudden. I've got something of his, a certificate, in my locker, I think. I'll find it later. Look, you can't really come in, school rules, but we can talk later in the music room if you like.
Tompkins jogs into the main building, running along the corridor to the front door, entering the empty foyer, normally reserved for visitors and officials. Nearly stumbling down the steps, he spots the two minibuses neatly parked up to the left of the doors. He bounds up to the blue bus and taps on the side door at the front. A blue light comes on inside and the artificial intelligence switches on a face recognition system and, registering an inmate, opens the door. Entering the gloom, trying to blink away the purple spots appearing before his eyes, Tompkins takes cautious steps along the central gangway.
"JS,"
he whispers hoarsely.
"Junior scientist,"
he calls very quietly. There is a sound from the rear, and the young man from the bar gate sits up to stare blankly at Tompkins.
"Jonathan Subramanian," says Tompkins. "It's Tompkins. Ben Tompkins, Thomas Benjamin Tompkins." "Nice to meet you," says Junior Scientist, ever vague.
"It's me, don't you remember?"
insists Tompkins in worried tones.
"Oh, yes, of course. How are you?"
says Junior Scientist. Tompkins exhales deeply, deflated. Junior Scientist uses his hands to pull himself to his feet, less than energetically.
"Come inside, there's tea and toast for newcomers, and a cooked meal later. You look like you might need both those things."
So Tompkins and Junior Scientist step out together into the now slanting but still warming sunshine. Mei Yi appears, running down the stone steps, her face glowing. Junior Scientist looks at the fetching young woman with interest.
"Jonathan!"
she shrieks.
"Oh, yes, Jonathan Subramanian.
He holds his hand out to shake.
Mei Yi recoils slightly, in horror she cannot quite disguise.
Tompkins gives a worried glance to each in turn. Junior Scientist's face is a featureless blank.
"Jonathan, it's me, Mei Yi."
She is trying to paint a warm smile onto what has become the ashen mask of her own face.
"Ah, yes, it's lovely to see you again."
No one is convinced. Even Tompkins squirms.
"You'd better go in for tea, but I'll leave you to it. It's in schoolhouse, which is boys, and I'm not allowed. I'll see you at evening prep,"
she gabbles before dashing off, so fast she seems literally to vanish. During evening prep, Mei Yi walks into the music room to find Miss Lomax with a pile of music manuscript papers marking some composition exercises.
"Oh, are you busy?"
"Not too busy to have that chat, Mei Yi,"
says Miss Lomax, looking up with a serious smile.
"This is that certificate I was telling you about,"
says Mei Yi, holding out a plastic laminated document, showing signs of rough or repeated handling.
"Junior Scientist, reads Miss Lomax aloud. "What year is that?"
she asks. Mei Yi articulates her face, forming a small dimple on one side of her mouth. Frowning, she replies,
"Oh gosh, I can never read those Mayan calendar things."
"Me neither, that's why I asked you. Never mind."
The frown and dimples on Mei Yi's face deepen. Her mouth crumples.
"I don't know what the glyphs say, and I can't remember, but it really can't be that long ago, not really."
"And you know Tompkins too, I gather, from before?"
"I think so, miss. Not very well, I think. He was probably a friend of Jonathan, J.S.
Miss Lomax cranes her neck and looks out of the window.
"Here comes Tompkins now,"
she exclaims in mild surprise. Mei Yi sits down at the stool in front of the harpsichord and opens the lid, but she doesn't play anything. Tompkins knocks and walks in briskly, swinging the clipboard with the list of refugees.
"All accounted for now then, Miss Lomax. You left this at schoolhouse,"
he announces brightly. Mei Yi lets slip a sob.
"You okay?"
he asks gently, more sympathetic than worried. Mei Yi starts to actually cry. He steps forward, making a solicitous bow, extending his hand, but stopping short of touching her.
"She's upset about that boy,"
says Miss Lomax.
He doesn't remember me, exclaims Mei Yi. He didn't recognise me at all. He doesn't remember me.
She puts her head in her hands and weeps bitterly.
JS, yes,
says Tompkins, failing to conceal a modicum of distress even on his part.
He didn't really seem to remember me either, actually. But then again, I'm not sure I'd have recognised him out of context in the street or whatever without his name on some bloody list.
He waves the clipboard as if it were a sinister totem.
Sorry, miss.
Miss Lomax indicates acceptance of this apology with a tight-lipped smile and a shake of the head, avoiding his eyes.
It's one of the things that happens. Maybe he'll recover his memory,
he says. Miss Lomax adds,
He really isn't himself under the circumstances. He's been through a catastrophic quantum dislocation, as have so many people here.
Tompkins undergoes a mental gyration which amounts to wondering for a moment what kind of war Miss Lomax had, but he finds it hard to focus the thought. Mei Yi sobs again, bouncing up and down on the harpsichord stool.
It's not like he was my fucking boyfriend or anything,
she bursts out, losing her cool. Swearing again, no apology this time.
So?
Prompts Miss Lomax.
His sister. She was my best friend, and I was there when he got his Junior Scientist Award.
Yes, I think I remember, sort of,
says Tompkins.
The sister?
Prompts Miss Lomax.
She's dead,
says Mei Yi bleakly.
I presume, must be.
Junior Scientist, initials JS, says Tompkins. Same initials as Jonathan Subramanian. That's why he got the nickname, I suppose.
That's right,
says Mei Yi intensely, though almost under her breath. A bell tolls in the distance.
Dinner bell,
says Miss Lomax inconsequentially. Mei Yi looks at her wrist device.
First sitting. The newcomers will be sent to second sitting, I expect.
Oh yes, the boys' cooked meal, says Miss Lomax.
Well, boys. Some of those boys must have been grown men before the wars.
Tompkins watches Mei Yi, still with tears on her cheeks, still making tiny convulsive sobs.
Before those bloody wars?
Miss Lomax continues. She laughs mirthlessly.
No, I'm swearing,
she says quietly.